Everyone thinks they know Jesus' story, but here's the thing, we really don't. I mean, think about it. We've got this figure who shaped Western civilization for 2,000 years, right? Billions of people base their entire worldview on his teachings. Wars have been fought in his name. Empires have risen and fallen, claiming to follow him. And yet, when you actually look at what we know about his life, there are massive gaping holes. Sure, the Gospels tell us about Bethlehem, the whole manger scene, shepherds, wise men following stars, classic stuff. Then we get glimpses of his childhood in Nazareth. Pretty normal Jewish kid, learning carpentry from his dad Joseph, helping out around the house. Then there's that one story when he's 12. This one's interesting. His family goes to Jerusalem for Passover, and somehow Jesus gets separated from the group. His parents are freaking out, searching everywhere. Where do they finally find him? In the temple, sitting with these ancient scholars, these guys who've spent their entire lives studying scripture. And Jesus, this 12-year-old kid, is just casually debating them, not only keeping up with their theological discussions, but actually amazing them with his wisdom. Religious teachers are sitting there with their jaws on the floor thinking, who is this kid? And then what? Complete radio silence. 18 whole years, gone, vanished, like he just disappeared off the face of the earth. No miracles, no teaching, no disciples following him around, no stories from his neighbors about this extraordinary young man in their midst. Nothing. It looks like someone took a giant eraser to nearly 2 decades of his life. Then boom, he shows up at 30 as this fully realized master, talking about radical love, healing people who've been sick for years, walking on water, feeding thousands with a few loaves of bread. He's speaking with this incredible authority, like he's tapped into something the rest of us can barely comprehend. So where the hell was he all that time? How does a carpenter's kid become the Christ? What happened during those missing years that transformed him from a smart 12-year-old into an enlightened master? What if Jesus was actually a yogi? What if those missing years weren't missing at all, but were spent in the ancient universities of India and Tibet, studying with masters who'd been perfecting the science of consciousness for thousands of years? And if that's true, well, that changes everything we thought we knew about him, doesn't it? Let's really think about this for a second, because it's honestly kind of mind-boggling. Why would any biography, especially one meant to guide billions of people for thousands of years, just completely skip nearly 20 years of someone's life? We're talking about the age 12 to 30 here, 18 years. That's not like skipping what someone had for breakfast. That's skipping the entire period where a human being becomes who they're going to be. Think about your own life. What happened to you between 12 and 30? Everything, right? That's when most of us figure out who we are, question everything our parents taught us, meet the people who change us forever, fall apart completely, somehow put ourselves back together, travel to new places, have our hearts broken, discover what we're passionate about, maybe find God, or lose God, or find God again. Those are the years when we develop the beliefs, the philosophies, the worldview that shapes our entire adult life. If Jesus was fully human, those years would have formed his whole approach to spirituality, his understanding of suffering, his relationship with the divine. If he was divine, those years would show us how divinity grows up in a human body, how cosmic consciousness learns to navigate the physical world. But the Gospels? They just don't talk about it at all. It's like reading a biography of Einstein that goes, he was born in Germany, he was really smart as a kid, and then he discovered relativity. What about everything in between? What about the experiences that shaped his thinking, the mentors who influenced him, the struggles he went through? Now, some people try to explain this away, They say, well, those years probably weren't important. He was probably just working as a carpenter, living a normal life. Come on. Are we really supposed to believe that the person who would become one of history's most influential spiritual teachers just spent 18 years hammering nails and building tables with absolutely nothing noteworthy happening to him? That doesn't add up. Here's what any mystic, any person who spent time studying consciousness and spirituality will tell you. When there's silence like that in a spiritual biography, it's usually hiding something important. Sometimes the most profound transformations happen in the spaces between the stories we tell. This is where our story gets really interesting. 1887, Nicholas Notovich, this Russian journalist, kind of an adventure seeker, always looking for the next big story, is trekking through the Himalayas. Beautiful but dangerous territory, steep mountain passes, unpredictable weather, the kind of place where one wrong step can change your whole life. Well, that's exactly what happened. Near Ladakh, in what's now northern India, Notovich takes a bad fall and breaks his leg badly. Now, if this happened to you or me today, we'd call an ambulance, get rushed to a hospital, have surgery, be back home in a few weeks. But in 1887, in the middle of the Himalayas, this guy is in serious trouble. Lucky for him, and maybe for all of us as it turns out, there's this Buddhist monastery nearby, Hemis Monastery. These monks, they don't ask questions about your religion or your nationality or whether you can pay them. They just see a fellow human being in pain and they take him in. So Notovich ends up spending weeks there, recovering. And you know what happens when you're stuck in one place for a long time with nothing to do but heal and think? You start talking to people, really talking. These monks are curious about this Russian visitor, and he's fascinated by their way of life. They've got this incredible library with ancient manuscripts, some of them thousands of years old, written in languages most of the world has forgotten. One day, the monks mention these particular scrolls they've got locked away in their archives, really old ones. They talk about this prophet from the West. They call him Isa, who supposedly came to India as a young man to study with their spiritual masters. Now, Notovich is really paying attention. According to these manuscripts, this Isa character was born into a poor family somewhere in the West. As a teenager, he felt this deep calling, this hunger for spiritual truth that he couldn't satisfy with the religious teachings available in his homeland. So he did what seekers have always done. He set out in search of masters who could teach him. The scroll described his journey eastward, how he studied the Vedas with Hindu priests, learned meditation and philosophy from Buddhist monks, spent years absorbing the ancient wisdom of India and Tibet. They talked about his incredible ability to understand complex spiritual concepts, his natural gift for healing, his profound compassion for all beings. Then, according to these texts, after many years of study and practice, Isa felt called to return home. He went back to his people in the West, began teaching the synthesis of Eastern wisdom he'd learned. But the religious authorities of his time couldn't handle his radical message. They saw him as a threat to their power, their interpretation of scripture. So they had him arrested, tortured, and executed. Notovich is sitting there, listening to the story, and his mind is absolutely blown. The timeline, the details, the description of his teaching, it all matches up perfectly with what he knows about Jesus Christ. He claimed he actually saw the manuscript with his own eyes, spent time studying them with the monks, even published what he said were direct translations from the original texts, and immediately all hell broke loose. When Notovich published his book, The Unknown Life of Jesus Christ, back in Europe, the reaction was intense. Western scholars went absolutely ballistic, called him a fraud, a liar, a sensationalist, just trying to make money off a shocking story. The idea that Jesus might have studied Eastern philosophy, that Christianity might have roots in Hinduism and Buddhism, that was heretical, unthinkable, dangerous. Religious authorities condemned the book. Academic institutions refused to take it seriously. Critics claimed those Hemis manuscripts never existed in the first place, that Notovich made the whole thing up. Some even suggested that when other investigators later visited the monastery, the monks denied knowing anything about the scrolls. Maybe the British colonial authorities pressured them to stay quiet. Maybe they were scared of the controversy. Maybe they thought it was safer to pretend the whole thing never happened. And look, let's be straight here. Notovich's story has never been completely, definitively proven. There are legitimate questions about some of his claim. The scholarly evidence is, let's call it mixed. But here's what's interesting. It's never been completely debunked either. In fact, over the years, other travelers, other researchers have claimed to have seen similar manuscripts in various Himalayan monasteries. Some say they found references to Isa in other ancient texts. Others have collected oral traditions from local people that seem to support parts of Notovich's story. What's really fascinating isn't whether every detail is 100% historically accurate. It's that even now, more than a century later, thousands of people still make pilgrimages to Hemis, hunting for those same scrolls. Spiritual seekers, scholars, curious Christians who've heard of the story and need to investigate for themselves. Some claim they've seen versions of the document. Others say the monks showed them similar texts, but asked them not to publicize the details. Still others come back empty-handed, but somehow changed by the experience of looking. And then there are those who say it doesn't even matter whether the physical manuscripts exist, because Jesus' actual teachings, when you really examine them, already sound Eastern. Jesus preached forgiveness in a culture obsessed with an eye for an eye justice. He talked about inner purity when everyone else was focused on external religious observances. He taught detachment from material possessions in a society where wealth was seen as a sign of God's favor. He showed radical compassion for outcasts, tax collectors, prostitutes, lepers, the people everyone else avoided. He rejected rigid religious rules and called out spiritual hypocrisy wherever he found it. He lived like he owned nothing, traveled with no possessions except the clothes on his back. He spent long periods in solitude, meditating and praying. Basically, he acted exactly like a yogi. Even his teaching style mirrors Eastern wisdom traditions. Those parables he's famous for, they work just like Zen koans. Simple stories that crack open your normal way of thinking and point you towards deeper truths. A rich man can't enter heaven any easier than a camel can go through the eye of a needle. This is basically a consciousness-shifting riddle about attachment and spiritual priorities. The first shall be last, and the last shall be first. Pure paradox, designed to flip your understanding of worldly success and spiritual advancement. Now here's where it gets really interesting. The yogic path talks about achieving God realization through surrender, service, and love. What did Jesus embody? Complete surrender to divine will, selfless service to others, and unconditional love even for his enemies. Eastern traditions speak of siddhas, realized masters who can perform miracles through their connection to cosmic consciousness. What was Jesus famous for? Healing the sick, multiplying food, walking on water, raising the dead. The ancient texts describe enlightened beings who radiate such powerful love and wisdom that just being in their presence transforms people. Sounds familiar? Here's the crazy part. Even if Jesus never physically set foot in India, never studied with a single guru, never read one page of the Upanishads, his soul definitely walked those paths. The consciousness he expressed, the wisdom he taught, the way he moved through the world, it's all there in the Eastern traditions, developed and refined over thousands of years. So, either he somehow independently discovered the same profound truths that Indian and Tibetan masters have been teaching for a millennia, or he actually learned them. Now, skeptics always bring up this objection. Come on, how could some carpenter from Nazareth get all the way to India? That's thousands of miles through dangerous territory. He didn't have GPS or airlines or even decent maps. But here's what most people don't realize. The ancient world was way more connected than we give it credit for. The Silk Route wasn't just one route. It was a massive network of trade paths linking Rome and Egypt with Persia, India, and even China. Merchants, scholars, pilgrims, and adventurers constantly moved back and forth along these routes, carrying not just goods, but ideas, philosophies, and spiritual teachings. We're talking about a superhighway of human knowledge and culture that's been operating for centuries by Jesus' time. Alexandria in Egypt was this incredible melting pot where Greek philosophy mixed with Jewish mysticism, Egyptian wisdom traditions, and yes, Eastern spiritual practices. There were Indian merchants living there permanently. Buddhist monks passed through regularly. Hindu texts were being translated into Greek and Aramaic. We actually have archaeological evidence of this. Coins from Indian kingdoms found in Mediterranean cities. Roman artifacts discovered in ancient Indian trading posts. Buddhist statuary showing Greek artistic influences. The cultural exchange was real and extensive. Think about it. If you were a young spiritual seeker in 1st century Palestine, frustrated with the rigid religious establishment, hungry for deeper wisdom, where would you go? The reputation of Indian spiritual masters was already legendary throughout the known world. Stories of yogis who could heal with a touch, teachers who understood the deepest mysteries of the consciousness, monasteries where ancient wisdom was preserved and practiced. These tales would have reached even small towns like Nazareth. And if you're a truth seeker, if you've got that fire in your belly that won't be satisfied with surface-level answers, the Himalayas have always been a magnet. Even today, thousands of Westerners make that journey every year, looking for what they can't find in their home traditions. Now imagine you're Jesus, clearly gifted, clearly hungry for truth, clearly not finding out what you need in the synagogues of Palestine. You've got 18 years to figure out who you are and what you are meant to do. Wouldn't you go where the masters are? Okay, now we're getting into some really controversial territory, like the kind of stuff that makes traditional Christian and Muslims really uncomfortable. In Srinagar, Kashmir, in the old quarter of the city, there's this ancient tomb called Rosabal. It's not a tourist attraction. Most guidebooks don't even mention it. But if you know where to look, if you ask the right locals, they'll point you towards this unassuming building that's been there for centuries. Local people say it's where Yus Asaf is buried. This foreign prophet who came from the West, taught about compassion and love, and lived peacefully among the Kashmiri people until he died of old age. Now, Yus Asaf might not sound familiar to you. But here's the thing. Some scholars suggest it could be a local pronunciation of Jesus the Gatherer, or even Jesus of the Essenes. The tomb itself has some pretty interesting features. There are footprint carvings in the stone, and they show what appears to be crucifixion wounds, nail marks in the feet. Coincidence? Most mainstream historians would say yeah. Obviously, Kashmir has been a crossroads for different cultures and religions for thousands of years. Lots of holy men have passed through. The footprint carvings could represent anyone. But the locals? They've been telling the story for hundreds of years, way before it became internet famous or got picked up by conspiracy theorists and alternative history buffs. The story goes like this. After the crucifixion, Jesus didn't actually die. Maybe he was taken down before death. Maybe he was in some kind of death-like trance that yogis can achieve through breath control. His followers helped him recover, and realizing how dangerous it was for him to stay in Palestine, they helped him escape. Where would he go? Back to the place where he learned the deepest spiritual truths, back to the masters who taught him, back to India. According to this tradition, Jesus made his way to Kashmir, where he lived quietly for many more years as a wise teacher, a healer, someone who'd been through the ultimate test and emerged with even deeper compassion for human suffering. He married, maybe had children, grew old, surrounded by students and friends who loved him as a profoundly awakened human being. When he finally died, a natural death, surrounded by peace, they buried him with the honor due to a great spiritual master. And there are some intriguing details that make you wonder. The age at which Yusuf supposedly died matches up to how old Jesus would have been if he had lived a normal lifespan. The teachings attributed to him sound remarkably similar to what we know about Jesus' philosophy. The timeline works. Could Jesus have survived the crucifixion? Could he have made it back east to live out his days quietly as a sage? We'll probably never know for sure. But it's a beautiful story, isn't it? The idea that instead of dying in agony, the teacher of love got to live a full life, continuing to learn and grow and share wisdom until his natural death. Maybe that's the point. Maybe the literal truth matters less than what the story tells us about the nature of spiritual awakening and the universal human search for meaning. Here's what I think is the most important part of all of this. Whether Jesus actually studied in India or not, whether he physically traveled those mountain paths or learned Sanskrit or meditated with Buddhist monks, his essence, his core teachings, his way of being in the world imitates the timeless path that's been walked by awakened beings throughout history. Buddha, sitting under the Bodhi tree, achieving enlightenment through compassion and detachment. Krishna, teaching Arjuna about the selfless action and devotion to the divine. Lao Tzu, writing about the Tao that can't be named, the effortless action that flows from harmony with the universe. Rumi spinning in ecstatic love, dissolving the boundaries between self and God. They all pointed toward the same fundamental truths. There's a self bigger and deeper than our everyday ego consciousness. There's a divine presence that goes beyond all names, all religious categories, all attempts to capture it in words. There's a deep peace, a profound love, a transformative wisdom that you can touch through silence, compassion, service, and surrender. The methods might be different. Meditation, prayer, chanting, service, study. But the destination is the same. Union with the divine, God realization, enlightenment, Christ consciousness. Call it whatever you want. So what if Jesus doesn't belong to just one religion? What if he wasn't meant to be the exclusive property of Christianity any more than Buddha belongs only to Buddhism or Krishna only to Hinduism? What if he was and still is an awakened being, a yogi in the true sense of the word. Not someone to worship from a distance, placing him on such a high pedestal that we can never hope to reach his level, but someone to understand, to learn from, to actually follow by walking the same path of awakening he walked. What if the whole point wasn't to create another religion with rules and hierarchies and institutions, but to show us what's possible when a human being fully realizes their divine nature?
Shivoham, Shivoham.